and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1167, and today's date is January 2nd, 2017, and the title of the episode is The Current Economic Collapse News Brief. Now, here we are in a new year, 2017. Obama's term is coming to an end, and we see that the market is very close to 20,000. Now, I do believe that Obama is not going to leave office until he gets 20,000. He wants everyone to see that, he took this economy, which was in crisis mode, and brought it back and made it better than ever. And we can see by his statements that he is out there letting everyone know how great the economy is. He's tweeting all over the place and telling everyone, the last 8 years, look what I did to the economy. It is incredible. And he's talking about the unemployment numbers. He's saying, look, everyone's employed. We're down to 4.6%. And he's saying how many jobs he's added. But again, when you look at the numbers very, very closely, you see these jobs are part-time. And when you look even closer than that, they manipulated the calculations, and many people have fallen off the job market. And when we look at this, we see the employment to population ratio reveals that even after Obama's recovery, we still have the lowest percentage of our population actually employed than at any point since the mid-'80s. And this looks slightly less remarkable when you look at the graph and you see that, it has really gone absolutely nowhere. Then he started to talk about Obamacare and how great Obamacare is. And when you look at the information and all the stats from Obamacare, we see that premiums are skyrocketing. I mean, the people in Arizona, their premiums are going up 145%. So for those people, it's very, very difficult to pay for this health insurance. And when you look across the country, what do you see? You see that these exchanges, they've gone bankrupt. And now many of the states, they used to have 3 or more options. They have 1 option now. So the situation is actually getting worse, not better. People are finding it very, very difficult to have health insurance at this point, depending on what group you are. Now, the middle class, they are hurt the most. The wealthy, well, they have a lot of money. They don't really care. The poor, they're being subsidized by the government. And all they care about is it's free. The people who are stuck in the middle, and the middle is very large, they are suffering from this. When we look at what's happening with the economy right now, with the Fed, where they raised interest rates in December, and they're promising to raise it maybe 3 more times in 2017. They did this in 2016, where they said they were going to raise the interest rates like 2 or 3 times, which that never happened. But when we look at this and we look at how much debt we have and what is happening with the dollar right now is at all-time highs. It's actually at a 13-year high. And Janet Yellen right now is playing a very dangerous game. There is simply really no logical explanation for what she's doing, because with a strong U.S. dollar, what do we see? Well, corporate profits, they suffer. GDP growth, that suffers. Bonds, debt deflation, mortgages and home refinancing, that suffers. U.S. manufacturing, well, that suffers. And when we look at this, there are few, if any, benefits to a strong dollar in the current fiat system. So the Fed is trying to convince everyone that the economy is well. They're raising rates, and they're going to do this maybe 3 times in 2017. And remember, when they raised rates last December in 2015, going into 2016, it triggered a 10% drop in the stocks in just a 2-week time period. And we can't forget about the $52 trillion in U.S. denominated debt sloshing around the system. This is an amount equal to nearly 70% of global GDP. So it's going to have an effect on the debt also. The situation right now is not in favor of Obama, the Fed, because what we're seeing right now is a deterioration of all the economic indicators, and they're all happening at once. And they know this. They realize that this system cannot be sustained like this. And what we're seeing is they're preparing to bring the system down. That's what that's what all this is about. It is preparing and getting ready to bring the system down under Trump. Now, of course, they're not just going to bring it down and say, look, the economy just fell apart. They really want a war started. And what Obama is doing right now, before he leaves office, he is really trying to push that war as hard as he possibly can. I mean, we saw out in Turkey, there was a gunman at a nightclub, shot up many individuals. Of course, the Islamic State was out there saying, yes, it is us. But we can see what's happening as Turkey moves closer and closer to Russia. The United States, well, they're creating terror in that country to make Turkey pay the price. And of course, the U.S. government, they're denying rumors that they had any data on the attack beforehand. But what we see is that the U.S. Embassy published a security message for U.S. citizens to get out of the area. Don't go to these certain clubs during the New Year's holiday, which is very interesting if they knew nothing about it. So what is happening here? What is happening is they're trying to have Turkey turn away from Russia. They're trying to put pressure on Turkey. And as Turkey continually cooperates with Russia, as Turkey continually gives Russia more and more information and goes along with what Russia wants in regards to Syria, the Islamic State, United States government, central bankers, they are going to put a lot more pressure on Turkey to try to stop this. And we can see at this point it is not working. Now, out in Syria, we can see that the U.S. government, they're becoming very, very desperate there. They are having the terrorist groups in Syria cut the water supply, as we know, in Aleppo. They're also cutting the water supply in Damascus. And they're cutting the services to civilians to make them suffer. And they're not just cutting the water supply, they're tainting the water supply with oil and fuel to make it so they cannot drink it whatsoever. And we see this tactic being used in many other countries where they fly in and they destroy the infrastructure and they put a lot of pressure on the people. We see this in Yemen, where the Saudi Arabia government, who's using paid mercenaries directed by the United States government, they're hitting civilian centers, they're hitting infrastructure, they're putting a lot of pressure on the people to go along with what they want. And we see the same thing happening right now inside of Syria, because they are desperate. Remember, Russia, the Syrian forces, they've taken Aleppo. They're sweeping through the country, removing the Islamic State, and they are winning. Russia and Turkey right now, and Iran, they said they will not allow Syria to be torn into zones. And they're going to try to stop this. But we can see the United States government central bankers, they are pushing ahead. And they're going to use any tactic they possibly can to try to take control back. Remember, their goal is to collapse the system. Their goal is to start a war. And we see something very interesting happening right now. Obama has ordered the aircraft carriers around the world back home. The USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Bush aircraft carrier, they're all coming home. Now, this is the first time we will have no U.S. carriers deployed anywhere in the world. Now, we do have some amphibious ready groups ready to go in certain areas, but the main fleet is being recalled back here. Now, the question is, why is this happening? Why has Obama recalled 10 U.S. Navy aircraft carriers from the Middle East, leaving the United States wide open for maybe an attack? Because it seems a little coincidental that he's doing this with 3 weeks left in office or so. So the question is, what are they preparing? What are they getting ready to do? Are they leaving a gap open to show that there's this main event going to occur, and this way they can say we are at war? But what we're looking at right now is they're definitely preparing for something. We see that Turkey has been cyber attacked. They tried to hit their power grid. Now, of course, we know it's not Russia. That wouldn't make any sense. Most likely it's the United States once again, putting pressure on Turkey. They said they didn't bring the system down, but there are constant attacks hitting it. Now, of course, they're going to say it's the Islamic State, but we know the Islamic State, they're not advanced enough to do this kind of stuff right now unless they have a huge backer. Now, what's very interesting is that the Washington Post, they were spreading news about how Russia hacked a Vermont power grid system. And they ran the story, and they're out there, yes, Russia is hacking, they're hitting the power grid, and it's up in Vermont, and they were pushing the story. Now, it turns out to be completely fake. But they were trying to keep this story continually going, but there were too many people calling them out on this, saying, no, this is not true. Actually, the Burlington Electric Department, they came out and said, yeah, this is not really what's happening. So what really happened was there was a laptop where an individual was working for the electric company. His laptop or her laptop got infected with malware. Now, it was not connected to the grid whatsoever, but they used this to convince everyone that Russia is hacking the power grid. Now, that turned out to be fake news. They retracted the story. I mean, if you go on the internet, you can still find it. But they were using this to convince everyone that this is happening. Now, when we take a closer look at the evidence of the Russian hacking into the election system, the DNC, we see David Spring via turningpointnews.org. He looked into this, and he looked at the 13-page report, which we did. But there was also an XLS spreadsheet that came along with it, which listed about 895 IP addresses. And he went through all the IP addresses. And there were more than 40 countries around the world. And looking through all of them, it was very difficult to find any Russian IPs. Now, there were 2 IP addresses located on line 259 and 261. And they referred back to Russia. Now, remember, there's 895 servers listed here. And they looked at one of the IP addresses, and it turned out to be a clean broadband server located near Ufa, which is a city in Russia with 1 million, with about 1 million people or so. And it's associated with an organization called the Mirror Group Ltd. And that is a corporation which is located in Great Britain. So that's kind of strange right off the bat. And again, if Russia was going to do this, they're not going to do it from their own city. And they're not going to do it into the United States from a Russian IP address. And then we have another IP address from Russia, which is like in a public library, which again makes no sense. So out of 895 IP addresses, they're telling us these 2 are coming from Russia. Now, they're trying to convince us from this that Russia is responsible. And remember, the IP addresses are from 40 different nations. And the people need to ask themselves why the FBI DHS chose to place their evidence in a CSV file rather than a normal document or spreadsheet and produce it with the PDF. Instead, they hid it away in a file the general public has little ability to read. And the reason they did this is because they don't have evidence. Again, all of this is made up to convince us that Russia is responsible. They're trying so hard to start this war with Russia, trying to provoke Russia. And what's happening right now, it's starting to build. And with the recall of all these U.S. warships right before Trump gets into office, well, it seems that something might occur. Remember, we have a lot happening in January. We have 70 countries meeting, I think, in January 17th to talk about Israel and Palestine. We have the inauguration. We have protests happening. And Trump came out, and he was out in Florida and Palm Beach, and he says he's going to blow the lid off of what really happened with the Russian hacking, saying he knows a lot about hacking. I don't know how much he knows. And he says it's very hard to track down, which I agree with him on that. You just can't come up with a list of IP addresses and say, yes, these are the people, because they're faked. And he says we're all going to find out Tuesday or Wednesday on the information that he has. And he says he has undisclosed information that shows that Russia was not hacking whatsoever. It looks like it might have been done from the inside. And we know from WikiLeaks that the email leaks did not come from Russian hacking. And we know that they've been putting out a lot of fake news, the Washington Post, Obama, and they're going to continually put out the fake news because they can't stop now. They can't stop the lie. They have to continue with it. And at this point, for the next 3 weeks, or even going into Trump's term, but I think these next 3 weeks are going to be the most dangerous. Now, is something going to happen? I don't know. But we can see there's a lot of indicators pointing to something that might occur. I mean, think about what they've done. What would be the purpose of showing that Russia was hacking? At this point, I mean, Trump has the electoral votes. It wouldn't do anything. The only reason to start using this type of propaganda is to convince everyone that they're prepared and ready to do something. That Russia is going to attack maybe the power grid. And it looks like this was the direction they were headed into. Now, many people might still believe this because people around the world, they don't see that the story was retracted. The news doesn't come out and normally say, oh, that was completely fake. Please don't listen to that. What Obama's going to do and what the U.S. government's going to do and what the corporate media is going to do is they're going to play on that. And they're going to build it up. Because it looks like what's happening right now is they're getting prepared and ready for a major event to start war. Now, either the war will come in the next 3 weeks, somehow, some way, or their plans might not work whatsoever, and they might wait until Trump is in office and then hit him with all of these different things. Now, can they get him to go along with what is happening? Well, we see that Trump now, he's going by different information than what Obama is throwing at him. Putin is holding back, and he's saying, you know something? We're not going to do anything. We're not going to remove the U.S. diplomats. We're not doing anything. So right now, their plans aren't going anywhere, which means they're going to take this to the next step. And that's when everyone should start to get worried. Because the next step are main events. The next step is hitting the power grid and blaming it on Russia. The next step is causing havoc, chaos, to get their point across. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.